Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you all. Got a great group. Feel free to introduce. Hi, feel free to introduce yourself, either unmute or in the chat.
Hi, I'm Berta Martin, and I'm taking classes at PCC. I'm interested
Hi.
in this class because, hi, I'm very interested in this class. Thank you.
Great. Well, my name is Ruth Ellis. I'm part of the Teach for LA team. I'm with the Center for Collaborative Education with the Ed Pathway program. And we are so excited that you all are participating in our 2024 version of Teach for LA. And I would like to welcome Mr. Jorge Ramirez. He is an early ed teacher, and he is doing a session today on higher order thinkings in preschool and in early childhood education. So without further ado, so we can maximize your time, continue to introduce yourself in the chat. And I'm turning this over now to Jorge.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ruth, for that wonderful introduction. Excited to be here with you all. Thank you for your time. I hope that our conversation today can help you have a perspective into how learning happens in the preschool classroom. This topic has been part of my research for maybe about a good 4 years now. And the more I research it, the more I present it, the more different ideas that I get. Also, looking at children to how they apply their own knowledge and how they see learning I find it to be very fascinating. And again, I hope with this conversation, it gives you some good insight into what goes on into children's uh, development, into how they learn. So here is my PowerPoint. You have access to it on the portal. You have an agenda. You also have these PowerPoint slides. If there's something in our conversation that really catches your attention and you want to have a conversation with me, please feel free to email me. You can also use the QR code to access my social media account. So as you can see, I wear a lot of hats in our field in early childhood education, and I'm very blessed to have this opportunity to share my knowledge and experience with you to hopefully give you a good understanding into how we put everything together in the classroom. One of my many roles is to teach child development at Cal State LA and ELAC, and having the opportunity to work with children in the early part of my day and then be able to apply it in the evening with students just puts it full circle for me. And again, I want to share my experience and everything else that I've gathered through my research with you on, have a conversation with you. So just like the title of our workshop is developmentally appropriate practices in the preschool classroom. According to NAYC, which is pretty much our research base in early childhood education, developmentally appropriate practices promotes the optimal development of children. So this is not to take away from any prescribed curriculum or any other strategies or practices that you might be using, but rather a shifting of the mind into how we inject developmentally appropriate practices. There has been a lot of conversation about age-appropriate practices, but as you and I both know, that usually doesn't always work best because we can be the same age as far as how many years we have of living experience, but when it comes down to our learning or social emotional age, that can change drastically. So the shifting comes to focusing on what is developmentally appropriate for these children. How can we help children maximize their learning to make it more meaningful to them, to have it more engaging for them, and to use what the entire research in our field suggests is play-based. Now, play is very subjective to a lot of people, and a lot of times the idea of children just playing doesn't settle good with parents, with educators, or with society as a whole. But what I want to let you know is that research is on our side, as one of my mentors says a lot. And our research does indicate that children learn best through play. And we'll talk more about that. DAP is also culturally, linguistically, and ability appropriate for each child individually. So we look at children as individuals. We look at them. How is Jorgito developing at his own pace without having the pressure of saying, well, the whole class is here, but Jorgito's not. So how can I get him to that point? We don't want to have that approach because sometimes they're all the same age, all the children the same age, but their learning is at very different levels. And that's what developmentally appropriate suggests. It does foster independence, autonomy, self-efficacy, and self-esteem. I want to ask you a very personal question, and you can unmute yourselves or you can use the chat. Think of classroom that you really had a good time in, whether it be high school years, middle school, elementary, or even a college course that you've taken. And think of a class that you just didn't have a connection with, where it was very monotone. Everything was written on the board for you. Here's a book, here's your homework, some ditto sheets. How did you perform in that class? What was learning like? Did you feel that for you personally, learning was at your optimal level? Did you feel that, I could do this on my own. I don't have to come to class. I can read the chapter on my own. I can answer the questions. I don't need you to read it for me. I don't need you to pretty much tell me what to do, when to do, or how to do it. And then I also want to ask you, think of another class where you felt that you were really connected to. Whatever content it was, you just felt engaged. You felt that your learning was at its optimal point. Did that make you feel good? Did you feel that coming back to this class was actually going to help you? Have those two classes in mind as we go through this conversation, and continue to think about, well, how can I apply this approach with young children? In our classrooms, there's always this push to have crafts in the classroom. And crafts are great. They're great for children. It stimulates a lot of their senses. You can get a lot of individual work, but most of the time, crafts has its own objective, its own purpose for it. And most of the time, crafts look a certain way. When children are doing crafts, let's say we are going to do some baskets. Everybody gets access to the same material at the same time. Most of the time, crafts have an end product. So when you're done with your craft, it's all going to look like this. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I want you to think about developmentally, how much critical thinking, how much analysis, how much creativity was allowed for each children with these craft projects. So again, keep that in mind. Can anybody tell me about a craft that they've done with young children? Anybody want to share? You can use the chat or unmute yourself. Think of a craft project. Kara, yes, Kara, thank you.
Hi, Professor. I'm a preschool teacher with a class of 4-year-olds, and throughout the school year, we do letter crafts. We learn our letters of the week, and then at the end of the week, we do, like I'm staring at the walls right now, Y for yawn or yell, and they have to put it together, and they can choose if they want to make a yawning face or a yelling face, and things like that. So they're kind of individualized, but not.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. See, Ashley said, during Christmas, we make Santa's beard out of cotton balls. Okay. So these are crafts, right? Everybody's doing the same project or the same craft. It sounds like Santa's beard is everybody's getting access to cotton balls, right? And Ashley, I'm curious to know, are all the cotton balls same color? They're all white? Children can't paint them different colors? See her response in the chat. All whites, okay, everybody, right? Because in our mind and in the children's mind, they have an idea into what Santa's beard looks like, right? And again, this is not a knock on craft projects, but the question is how much creativity, how much analysis, and how much critical thinking is happening with children when they're doing these crafts projects. So that's one of the types of project that exists in our early childhood education field. Another one is well known as teacher-directed activities. So for this, the teacher tends to plan a lot. There's a lot of cutting involved. There's a lot of template tracing. And a lot of schools that I worked for in the past would have teacher planning. And during that teacher planning, it was, okay, I'm going to write all the children's name in yellow paper. I'm sorry, in yellow highlighter and white paper. I'm going to cut out the letter of the week. I'm going to get the cotton balls ready. I'm going to have a template of Santa's beard, what it looks like. And then the next day, the children have access to this pre-made material, right? All these pre-made activities or crafts that they're all going to look the same. If it weren't for the child's name, either on the front or in the back, the question is, how would you know whose is who? So these teacher-directed activities are led by teachers, obviously. The child has very little input because if it's not the curriculum telling you what you should be doing, it's the teacher or the adult deciding this is what we're going to do. It is considered a cookie cutter work, which is literally like a cookie cutter. Here's a cookie cutter and everybody's going to get it and everybody's going to look the exact same way, despite their developmental abilities, despite whether they have the skills to complete that task. Everyone is still going to look the same way. Usually in my experience, what I've heard a lot of, and please use your emojis to laugh if you're familiar with this, or unmute yourself, raise your hand, use the chat. Usually there's a teacher that has the glue bottle and says, well, I'm going to give you some glue, but it's going to be ... not a lot. Because God forbid we give the child access to that glue bottle because, oh my gosh, now there's more work for me because I got to clean it up, right? So there's one glue bottle for your small group and everybody has to wait on the teacher. So here's Jorgito. Jorgito's going to go first, ... not a lot. Brianna, ... not a lot. Joy, ... not a lot. Okay, everybody's done. Okay, well, you got to wait, Jorgito, because now I got to go back the other way. The waiting time for children tends to increase. And based on the research and my experience, what I've noticed is that the longer the children have to wait, the more likely they're going to misbehave. One of the strategies that I use, and it's not usually well received, is I don't have my children lined up. Go wait at the door. That's the only rule. Wait at the door before we go outside. You need to use the toilet, go use the toilet. Once somebody's there, then you got to come back. This waiting time for children when they have to be lined up waiting usually is an opportunity for them to misbehave. Well, what do you do when you wait? What I see a lot of adults doing is they grab their phone and they start scrolling, right? But children don't have their electronic devices in school, so what are they going to do when they're waiting? They're probably going to misbehave. As I mentioned, the teacher usually prepares these activities. And the reality is that with these teacher-directed activities and these craft projects, the cognitive demand tends to be lower for children, which again, there really isn't anything bad because you're still stimulating their cognitive skills, but the demand is really low where you really don't have much to do. So here's what I want you guys to do, okay? I want you to, if you have access to a paper, get a paper, and we're gonna do the letter of the week. And the letter of the week is gonna be letter J. Okay, so I want you to do letter J, your paper. Okay, there's the letter J. So I'm gonna pick on, I see Bertha on my screen. Bertha, you don't have to speak if you don't want, but please use the chat. Does the J mean anything to you? Oops. Bertha Martin, does the J mean anything? No, not really. And I can assume why, because you don't have the letter J in your name, or in this case, for your last name either. So Jorgito is going to be excited when we're doing the letter J because that's my letter. That's my name. I can't wait to do the letter of the week. And I'm going to do it the whole week because that's mine. And understanding that children at this stage, they're very egocentric. The world revolves around them. And I can't say this enough because when you understand and really take this to heart, children are egocentric, it's going to shift the way you do your activities, because you're going to realize, well, for Joy, she loves this activity because her name also starts with the letter J. But for Brianna, she doesn't care because it's the letter J, and there is no letter J in her name, right? So I want you to have this in mind when you're doing the letter of the week. Now, if we decided to do, for whatever reason, that we have to do a letter of the week, how can you make it more creative? How can you make it more stimulating and raise that cognitive demand to be higher, where children are analyzing what they're doing? They're building on their critical thinking skills, and they have some form of creativity to bring to it. I've seen a lot of the letter of the weeks. It's usually the teacher does the letter like it's here. Right, here's a letter J for everybody. And then the children are going to get some rolled up tissue paper, and the teacher's going to put the glue. Let me get the glue. Here's the glue, and I'm going to go dot, dot, not a lot. Oh, nope, sorry, Brenda, you have to keep waiting. Enjoy, you guys have to wait. I'm going to do it with Jorgito. Dot, dot, not a lot. Dot, say it with me. Dot, not a lot. All right, Jorgito, you're good to go. Now start gluing your tissue paper that I cut, that I rolled up, and put it on each glue. And there, now you know what, Jorgito? Now you did the letter J. And Jorgito's excited and he's fascinated because letter of the week is letter J, and that's his letter. And although Joy has a letter J too, he doesn't care because it's his letter. But Brianna is like, whatever. You can tell me it's jump, you can tell me it's jelly, you can tell me whatever it is, I don't care because it is not in my name. And this is the way that children do think. I invite you to find creative ways to do the letter of the week, or maybe the letter of the day, and allow children to get creative with it. I was never a fan of this, and I don't want you guys to get fired, but I do want you to have a conversation with your administrators into asking them, how much cognitive development are we doing when we're giving the children pre-cut materials? When the children have very little input, when the children are waiting? Is that what you want for children? I don't know about you, but I don't. I know I don't. Oh, let me erase my J. Okay. So process work. Now, here's some process work that I want you to really think about. Process work is just that, it's a process. And in this process, you invite the child to go through that process with you. You allow them to say, well, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? You're focusing on skills that you want children to build. And you're not focusing on, they all need to have this exact same thing, the exact same color with the exact same template. You're asking yourself, what are the skills that the children can develop through these activities that's going to get them prepared for the longer outcome? And we'll talk more about this in our conversation. This focus is on the process. It uses the child's creativity. It invites them to bring in their own perspective. This idea that children come to school without any knowledge is beyond me. The reality is that children come with tons of knowledge. What we need to do is we need to add to that by giving them that opportunity to share with us what they know. You ever ask them, how was your weekend? And they're just eager and they're telling you everything they did, every single detail of their weekend. That's their funds of knowledge. And how do you build that to stimulate their creativity, their analytical skills, their creative skills, their problem-solving skills? How do you foster that when you're doing all the work for them and they have very little input? When children get to do their own work, they tend to be more proud of it. Look what I did. I have a student in our class that he enjoys working with clay. And he makes all kinds of creatures. He's made Godzilla, a sea creature, and his work is just fascinating. One of my co-teachers said, "Oh, he can make an art gallery." It's like, he sure can. And I hope that his parents continue to foster that. And I imagine if he comes into class and it's time to use clay, and we're going to tell him, nah, no Godzilla, no sea creatures. You're just going to do a little pinch pot, which we've done. And he had no interest. It was like, nah, can I just do my sea creatures? How about you do your pinch pot first, and then you can do your sea creatures? Now, there's a purpose for those pinch pots, which in my mind, it was like, man, this is not me, but here I am stuck into wanting to do something, but it's not allowing them to be creative. This child had no interest for it. He lost interest of working with that clay because we wanted him, well, I'm going to rephrase it, because I wanted him to do a certain thing. So guess what? After he was done with it, okay, now do your secret, do whatever you want. Go, come on, get back into it. You need to find a balance into, okay, I'm going to give you a teacher-directed activity, but now I'm going to give you the opportunity to be creative and do whatever you want to do with it, because I know that's stimulating to you. How do children acquire their knowledge with developmentally appropriate practices? Based on the story I just told you, as you can see, it's building the meaningful knowledge to them and using open-ended questions. One of his sea creatures was very long, and it was, where did you see this from? Oh, no, I didn't see it. I thought about it. Well, what did you do? What did you make? And you can let him go on, and he'll describe every single detail that he put together in his sea creature. And all we needed to do was just to ask open-ended questions. What is that doing? What's developing language? It's developing, more importantly, self-esteem and self-efficacy, because now we have a child that's really focused into what he wants to do, and he's feeling good about it. If this child continues to grow and he is fostered in that manner, he's going to have a self-efficacy that no one is going to be able to deteriorate. I need you to write a 10-page paper. I can do it. I need you to do a research on astronomy. I can do it. Because that mindset continues to take with him as he continues to grow and develop, as he transitions to TK. This hands-on approach, our research does indicate that children are best when you allow them to do it. The hands-on approach is very intentional with them. Sure, there's times in our yard that I want them to do something else. I want them to do longer activities with more purposeful and intentional goals that I have in my mind. But then I think to myself, is that just feeding my own ego? Or am I really fostering and developing them what they should be doing, building those skills to get them to that point? I continue to use that phrase, building on skills. These are the types of lessons that are more optimal for children. That's going to get them to the point of readiness. I'm sure you've heard, oh, we got to get ready for kinder. We got to get ready for kinder. And we have this idea that kindergarten is where we want them to be ready. But Jorgito gets ready with the colors, the numbers, the letters, the shapes, the size, and all that other stuff, but he has no social and emotional awareness. What good is that going to do? He has no self-efficacy in his work. What good is that going to do? Sure, Jorgito's going to be able to count to 1 million, but counting to 1 million is not on our assessment tools. Counting to 25 is not even a goal. But these ideas that they should be ready for kinder, and we come up with these ideas and think, yeah, that's how we're going to get them. Now, look, don't get all worked up. I'm going to tell you how we get there, okay? But helping children build these skills have to come in through meaningful activities, and they're meaningful to them, not to you. This is a knock on prescribed curriculums, and we can have a conversation if you like about that. But prescribed curriculums come in a box, and they're given to you, and it says that you have to do this way at this time for X amount of days. How stimulating is that? I had this conversation with previous administrators, and I said, so we have a child that's going to be in our program for 3 years. 3 years. And for those 3 years, in September, for 8 weeks, they're going to be talking about beginning of the school year. For 3 years, for 8 weeks, they're going to be doing the exact same thing. How much development is happening there? Now, sure, we can watch a movie multiple times and get very different message from them and have a different perspective on them, but that's us as adults. Young children, if you're not stimulating them, if you're not allowing them to be part of their learning process, how much engagement are you getting out of that? There was, who was this? Claudia wrote something on the chat. I love that, Claudia. I love that, Claudia. So now here's my challenge to you. So you have paper, tissue paper, feathers, buttons, stickers, foam letters. Foam letters. Can your arts card be just as effective without having a cookie cutter as foam letters for children? Let's see what Claudia says.
Wait, repeat. Sorry, I'm on my nap time with my kids. Wait, repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, can you say the question again? I forgot.
Yeah, so the question is, I'm looking at the message you posted on the chat, and you said that you have all these different materials for the children's art card. You have paper, tissue paper, feathers, buttons, stickers, foam letters. Can your art card be just as successful without having the foam letters?
Yeah, it could be, but we have that just for some of the kids that are still working with their fine motors, like learn how to take it off. But yeah, we have that for them to also help them learn like how to write their names and things like that. So we also have like the regular construction paper for them to be able to like learn how to write their name and things like that. So I guess, yeah, you can say it can be a little bit more successful without them.
I love your answer, Claudia, and I love the intentionality behind it. So it's not per se that, oh, the letters are there for you because we don't trust you that you can write the letters the way they should be. It's more of like the fine motor skill. And I can see the foam letters with the stickies on the back to take it off and then put it on and be able to recognize the letters, because letters do carry meanings. Letters do have a sole purpose individually. When you put them together and they make words, different sounds. I get all that. And I love the fact that you're seeing beyond that. There's other purposes for those letters, not just to use them as a template. Thank you for that, Claudia. I appreciate it. And so income HOTS, and HOTS is the acronym for higher order of thinking skills. Higher order of thinking skills is something that I've done a lot of research with, and when I present HOTS, I like to talk about how we can get children to the highest cognitive demand. This is not to say that the lower part of the pyramid is not effective. It's more stimulating, and you can get more when you focus on analyzing, evaluating, and creating of the higher order of thinking skills. It poses a lot of questions. It also allows the children to give you what they think. It gives them an opportunity to develop these scenarios in their mind because they're analyzing, they're evaluating, they're creating their own perspective. It challenges students to give you an explanation. Why do you think this is happening? When children are engaged, preschool children are engaged with higher order of thinking skills, they tend to explore more. They tend to ask questions for clarification. And they tend to understand different perspectives, not just their egocentric mind, which helps them to organize their thoughts into their own learning process. So here's Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy. This is the revised version by Armstrong. The goal is for children to be the top three, which is create, evaluate, and analyze. Create talks about original work. Children are creating their own work. I enjoy collecting memorabilia, whether it be sports, whether it be newspapers, not that they have much anymore of, but I like collecting things that are original. For example, I remember when USC football was winning championships back when they were more relevant. I would run to the store the next morning and buy the newspapers because although yes, they were printed millions of them, I wanted to have that newspaper of them winning the championship. As a matter of fact, I still have it at home. I want children to be able to create their own authentic work, that one of a kind, because I knew that the following day they probably weren't going to talk about the championship game anymore. And I didn't know if they were ever going to win the championship. And they haven't since then. I still have the newspaper. It's still in pretty good condition because everything in that content, it's original work. But in connection to children's work, when you allow them to create their own work, it might not look the same again because maybe they finally developed the hand-eye coordination that they needed to make their drawings more intricate. Maybe they finally put a neck on the body instead of just having the body and the head without the neck. Maybe their work is now more detailed where they're actually putting hands not coming out of their head, but out of a body, right? So when you allow children to create their own work, it's sort of authentic. It's that one-of-a-kind artwork that we all cherish so much. When you're focusing on the second tier, the second to the top tier is evaluate. There's a purpose, there's a justification, there's a reason why they're doing that type of work. And when you ask children, well, tell me about what you've done here, they're able to give you that detail because one, they created it, and two, it took them a different thought process of putting things together as opposed to, here's a tissue paper and a ball, I gotta glue it to that glued dot. Oh, here's another letter that I don't care about, but I'm just putting it there because that's what I'm told that I have to do. The third from the bottom talks about, and third from the top, I'm sorry, talks about analyzing. This is helping children to develop those critical thinking skills that we're talking about. When children analyze their work, they're connecting synapses in their brain. They're understanding, they're rationalizing. They're finding a purpose into what they're doing. I hope your answer is no to my next question, but have you ever asked someone, hey, why do you do what you do? And their response is, oh, we've always done it like that. You never experienced anything like that, right? And I hope you don't. When children tend to respond that way, they're in autopilot mode. Have you ever been driving somewhere and next thing you know, you're at the location and you're like, how did I end up here? You're in autopilot mode. When children are able to create, evaluate, and analyze, they are more in tune into their senses and into what they're doing that makes it more purposeful. So they're not doing things just because. They're not, like what my mentor likes to say, they're not regurgitating things. They have an understanding of concepts. They're conceptualizing what they're learning that then they're able to apply it. Just real quick on memory. Remember, we have two types of memory. We have the short-term memory and the long-term memory. You don't want children to store all this meaningful knowledge in the short-term memory because they memorize it and then they'll probably forget about it. Like KLMNOP in the ABCs. No, it's not KLMNOP. There's multiple letters in there. You want them to store in the long-term memory. When you store things in your long-term memory, it's more meaningful to you. And you're able to create new knowledge based on your memory, to evaluate what you're talking about because you're able to analyze everything that you're doing. That's where you want to get to with children when you're doing these activities. That's why higher order of thinking, it's so important when you're doing your tasks, your activities, your projects with them. You don't want them just here, have at it. There has to come a conversation so the child is able to say, oh yeah, I can make that work. Nah, you know what? I tried that, but that didn't work. I'm going to try it another way. Okay, let me see. If I want water in this volcano, but I have a small bucket, I'm going to be walking back and forth. But if I get a big bucket, then I can probably get more water, right? This is focusing on creating, evaluating, and analyzing without you telling them, how can we do this? How can we do that? So there's less scaffolding on your part because the children have these skills. They have the ability to problem solve on their own. They're more independent. When they're problem solving, they're independent. That usually equates to a higher self-efficacy, which they feel good about, which is what we want children to do. We want them to feel good when they come to school. Well, at least I do. How do we do that? Give them more opportunity to initiate their own activities. Set up things out there with the purpose. There's an intention behind it. Remember, children like routine. Children like to predict what's happening next. When they're not in their routine, or there's a disruption in the routine and it becomes unpredictable, it usually dysregulates them. It usually leads to more of the challenging behavior because, wait, I thought we were going to do this, but now we're doing something else. Think of what happens to you when you wake up in the morning and you snooze, and then you snooze again. And then you say, oh, 5 more minutes. And then all of a sudden you're late. What does that do to your routine? How does your day flow? Or for those of you that drink coffee, what if you don't have your morning coffee? Does it affect the rest of your day? If you say yes, then you understand routines. What about on your commute to work or to school in the morning? What if there's an accident, or what if there's a detour that you have to take? How do you respond to things like that? Are you the type of person that says, oh, no big deal, I'll just take a detour? Or do you get very anxious about it? And if you get very anxious about it, it probably has a lot to do with you like routine because it's predictable. Children like that too. Again, they're egocentric. They want to know what's going on. They want to know that it's predictable to them. They like new things, but you have to prep them for that. When children have the opportunity to initiate their own activities, there's more discovery. You're able to reinforce boundaries because they're discovering on their own. Well, remember what we said? We said that only 2 friends can use it at a time. How many friends do we have here? Oh yeah, but I really want to use it. Yeah, I know, I'm sure you do. But remember what the boundaries are here. Go make another choice and then come back. This challenges them to interact with other people because as much as I want to do that, I can't. So I got to go find something else. Guess what? Now I got to go talk to another peer. This can also lead to more autonomous work, which leads to that one-of-one artwork that we want. You want children to have a high self-efficacy. You want them to be responsible. Then allow them to partake in their own choices when it comes down to activities. There's a creative way of saying, I have to do this project with them because my school is very curriculum driven. Okay, fine. But you can provoke their thinking to have an interest and change your wording and how you present it to them. So then they know, oh yeah, no, I decided to do that. It really wasn't the teacher's idea, it was my idea. Why is it important for children to be autonomous? Well, think of the big picture, the whole child approach. It builds on their emotional competencies, which we've talked about, self-esteem, self-efficacy. When children are autonomous, they're likely to have the opportunity to choose their own activity, which again leads to autonomy and independence, which reinforces self-efficacy and self-esteem, which is what we want with children. So all of this is just like a cycle. If I do this, I'm going to get that, that leads to that, that leads to that, and it comes back to the whole child. So here's something that when I read this research, I was fascinated by it, and I enjoy sharing this because this is what blows a lot of people's mind, especially parents when I have conversations with them. Children have higher academic performance when they have exploratory experiences in early childhood. In other words, if children have the opportunity to explore with their work, with their projects, they tend to have a higher academic performance when they transition to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, what have you. So if we are really focusing on kinder readiness, TK readiness, elementary readiness, whatever readiness you want to call, life readiness, then in early childhood, you have to give them the opportunity to explore. You have to be willing to relinquish that control and say, you know what, I'm gonna let the children choose. How do you do that in a prescribed curriculum? Easy. Look at the curriculum and look at it as a tool. And if it's asking you that you need to do certain things, then look at the other options and say, well, I'm going to give them 2 choices, and then I'm going to allow them to choose. A choice is not do whatever you want. It's a free-for-all. No, a choice is there's a purpose. and you have two choices. So Jorgito, right now you have a choice. You can either go paint at the easel or you can work on the water table. What would you like to do? I'm not telling you what to do. You make a choice. That eventually leads into the child saying, you know what? I made that choice. And then you can hold them accountable for it. Well, you said you were going to use the easel, but now that you're done, you got to go clean it up because you said you were going to work at the easel, right? Building self-esteem, building self-efficacy leads to autonomy and independence. Collectively can lead into higher academic performance. Cognitive skills. These are the skills that children need to be academically successful. Cognitive skills is not rote learning. It is not rote teaching. It's about creating, evaluating, and analyzing your work. You can do that. You can totally do that with children at any level. Think about yourselves. This is another self-reflection opportunity. In my university classes, and even at ELAC and Cal State LA, when I give students the opportunity to write a reflection paper, most of the time the question is, so what do you want me to write about? And I tell them, well, these are my boundaries. This is what you need to include. How you include it, it's up to you. Can you show me a sample? No, because I don't want to give you a template of what you need to follow. So what do you want me to write about? Whatever you want. You have to reflect on, and here are the boundaries again. Here are the tools. Here's the art cart with all these materials that you can do whatever you want to do with them. Just do something. And then the level of anxiety with my students tends to rise. Can you just tell me what you want me to write about? No, I want you to reflect on, and here are the tools, and you do what you want to do. So I'm giving you this example so you can see long-term how this can possibly affect the way you think, and it affects your self-efficacy in the classroom because you're waiting to be told what to do, when to do, and how to do it. In other words, if we are conditioning children at a very young age to wait on the teacher, to do as the teacher says, and to do it when the teacher says, these children are going to grow up being dependent on people. Wait, hold on. Let's backtrack to the previous slide. We're talking about autonomous children, independence. How do you build them? Let them create, let them evaluate their work, and let them analyze their work. I don't want to say that it's about us wanting to be in control because we enjoy being in control. I want to say that we have been led to believe that when young children come into class, they don't have the ability to do anything. Therefore, we need to cut everything for them. We need to give them cookie cutters. We need to limit the amount of glue they use. That's not accurate because our research thoroughly points out that children learn best through play. If children are not playing, and again, by play, I don't mean a free-for-all, I mean intentional play, then how do you build these opportunities? If you're doing the letter of the week, how much creating is happening? How much evaluating is happening? And how much analysis is happening? When you're doing that dot, dot, not a lot, and here's your tissue paper rolled up and put it on that dot, are you really developing these cognitive skills? In my entire career, 24 years that I've been working with young children, I've tried the letter of the week once. And I said to myself, never again. Look, I told my workshop participants yesterday, and I'll tell you guys, don't get fired. Don't get into any arguments with your administrators. But have a conversation with them and ask them, are we building individual whole children? Or are we just pretty much in a factory line, building them to be little robots? Wait for the teacher. Wait, whatever the teacher says. Wait till the teacher tells you to do it. And it has to look the exact same way. Provocation with open-ended questions. Now, I've had a lot of conversation about what is an open-ended question. Well, open-ended question, think of it being open for interpretation. You're asking the child for their perspective. In other words, you're not looking for a correct or wrong answer. You're looking for them to tell you how they perceive whatever the question is. One of my assistants, maybe about 8 years ago, asked me, so when do you tell the child that they're wrong? And I said, ooh, what do you mean? And she said, yeah, so what if I ask the child, like, I don't know, what letter makes the letter A? And I said, okay. And she says, well, what if the child says C instead of A? How do you tell the child that they're wrong? And I said, well, let's take a step back. And I'm going to ask you, why is it important for the child to know the sound of A and what letter that makes? Is that part of your assessment? And she was like, hold on. She went over, she looked at the DRDP, she reviewed it because that is the assessment tool that most of the public schools use. And she said, it's not. And I said, so then why are you setting up children to fail based on what you think they should know? Look at the preschool learning foundations. Look at your assessment tools. And then when you have a good understanding into what they're asking for children to have, what skills they should be building, scaffold that and creatively inject it into the child's play. So when you're assessing them, you don't set them up for fail, but rather you're building on the skills that they have. And then she said, so how do you build phonological awareness? And I said, you read to them, you sing to them, and you sing with them, and you read with them. It's like learning anything. Can I expect you guys all, if you guys show up to my ELAC class on the very first day and we're doing child development 1, and I tell you, you know what? Your first assignment is you are going to write a dissertation at a PhD level. Can you imagine the anxiety? Can you imagine how many students are instantly logging into their phones and dropping their class and saying, I'm not taking this guy. This guy's crazy. You can't. You can, but it's unrealistic. You're going to set everybody up to fail. With children, if you are not approaching them and understanding how they learn best, you're setting them up to fail. You're setting them up to be dependent on a teacher. When early childhood education, specifically preschool, talks about autonomy, self-efficacy, independence, yeah, you want that. But when you're setting them up to fail, do you think they really want to participate in all these activities that they're not going to be successful in? You have to find a creative way to provoke them. How do you do that? Ask open-ended questions. Don't look for a right or wrong answer. Depending on developmentally where your children are, you might ask questions that lead into certain things, like an obvious question. Oh, what do you see behind me? It's a picture of the yard that I work in. Yeah, you see trees, you see big Legos, you see stairs, you see sand, you see like a plank, a big plank. Yeah, right. The question has certain answers, but I'm not asking you a question where you're going to fail at. I want you to feel good about answering questions. It really strikes a nerve when students tell me, I didn't want to ask because I thought it was a stupid question. And I tell them, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I tell them, I was told that my entire life, and I really never understood it until I became a teacher, when I realized children think very different than a teacher. And it is a teacher's responsibility to acknowledge that children's perspective are very different. Have your perspective like a microscope. You always want to continue to explore. You always want to provoke children to scaffold them into what you want them, where you want them to get at. Now, these are skills. We want them to write their name. Yes, we do. We want them to be able to differentiate colors and identify them. Sure, we do. We want them to have a good understanding of number concept. Of course we do, right? But when you're not provoking their interest through questioning, 3 is irrelevant if they're 4. 3 is irrelevant if they're 5. Can you think back to when you were 3 years old? Me, when I was 3, yeah. Now it's relevant to you because it's personal to you. So provoking children's thoughts with questions that are personal to them can easily spark an interest with them. This is going to help you guide the child's perspective back into the skills that you want them to acquire as they continue to develop. Yeah, Leticia, the slides are available to you in the portal. You can shoot me an email and I will gladly send them over to you. These provoking questions provoke a sense of ownership because they feel good, which is self-esteem, and they have confidence in their abilities to be academically successful, which is their self-efficacy. Here's your final reflection, okay? What is your goal for children in the classroom? If you're in a classroom, then take this question to heart. If you're thinking about going into the classroom, then ask yourself this before you even take on any roles in the classroom. You want your children to be a copy machine? Yes, Leticia, I'll provide it to you before we go. Do you want them to be a computer? Or do you want them to write the code? So think of a computer. I can take my, oops, where'd it go? There we go. I can take my agenda, right, and put it on top of the copier, close the lid, punch in the numbers, hit start, and it's just gonna zoom, 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 right? The copy machine is literally just copying. If children are exposed to teacher-led activities, they're probably gonna be copiers. They're gonna be copying everything that they're doing. Oh, here's a sample. It has to look like this. It's a whole other conversation, whole other workshop on that. You want it to be a computer. The computer is what we're using now, whether it's your phone, whether it's your tablet, desktop, whatever it is. Computers consist of 2 things, zeros and ones. You can type in, well, not anymore, but back in the day, you would type in commands and the computer would do it. Now it's easier. But every single code of the computer consists of zeros and ones. So to type in the letter A, the code is a certain amount of zeros, certain amount of ones in a certain order that gives you the letter A, right? That's a computer. Or do you want them to write the code? Now, writing the code is understanding how many zeros and how many ones in what order they go for writing A. And whatever code that is, it cannot have been somewhere else because then it's going to think that I wanted to do that as opposed to this. Think of the cognitive demand with the copy machine, with the computer, and with the code writer. What do you want for children? Anybody want to share? Use the chat. Yes, Berta, I'll give you the slides. I'll give you my email, and then you can access the slides on the portal to feel confident in the classroom. I love that. Yes, thank you, Leslie. What do you want for children in your classroom? I don't want them to be a copy machine. I was a copy machine in elementary. And you know what? I had a lot of A's. Why? How? I can't tell you. I can tell you, though, that I was really good at doing this. And then writing it on my paper. And then, like, stretching, like, oh, I got it. I'm writing it down. That was a copy machine. I was really good at following directions. Really good at following directions. Sort of like a computer, following commands. Was I able to create my own thinking, analyze my work? No. Because I was product of a school district that firmly believes and the teacher is going to tell you what to do, when to do, and how to do it. That's not the way children work best. That's not what our research of early childhood education, specifically in the preschool classroom, talk about. We talk about letting children play. We talk about building their play. So how do we get there? And that's your task, right? That is your task to do. Here are my references, but before we, here's my, you guys can have my information here. You can scan the code, it'll give you access to my social media. That's the email. You can email me out if you have any questions, if you want the slides. I sincerely thank you for allowing me to share some of the research that I've done, some of the strategies that I've used, and some of my experience. I hope that this gives you a good insight into some of the things that I've done that have produced a better outcome with children. This outcome is exactly what you're writing about. You're talking about a sense of belonging, self-esteem, self-efficacy, confidence. Yeah, you want that, then focus on the higher order of thinking skills from Bloom's taxonomy that's going to help you build that within your children. Children want to learn, and they're going to learn best when they're given the opportunity to shine. I hope this conversation gave you a good perspective. Again, I thank you for your time. I wish you a very blessed day. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We can also have a conversation now. For my part, I thank you again. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you have any questions, please shoot them out.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge. It was very interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Berta, for being here. Appreciate it.